No, I just remember struggling with that, just feeling like I had lost my value. And you don't get thanked by your children for changing diapers and cooking meals, and uh, you kind of sometimes get taken for granted.
Hello everybody and welcome back to my channel. You'll notice we're in a different setting and I have a special guest today. This is my mom and I've been asking her to do a video with me for quite a while. I think I mentioned it to her last year about letting me interview her about what it was like to be a stay-at-home mom and a homemaker when she was, which was with me. I have a younger brother and a younger sister. We were all three homeschooled. She has 2 homeschool graduates and she's homeschooling my sister, and a couple of y'all have asked me different questions about my mom. So I'm not going to tell you too much about her because she's going to answer some of those questions, but we're going to go ahead and get started. So I'm going to let her introduce herself and then we're going to get into the interview questions.
Well, my name is Candy. I'm Emily's mom. I have a son, Peyton, and another daughter, Hannah. And this coming May, me and my husband will be celebrating 30 years of marriage. I count it a privilege to have been able to be a stay-at-home mom and be able to educate my children. And my youngest daughter will be graduating this year, so that will close that chapter of our homeschool, and we will be starting a new journey. So anyway.
Okay, so I had typed up a few questions for her, so I let her look over them so she could get a feel of what I was going to ask her. But the first question I want to ask you is can you just tell me, leading up to when you decided to stay home full-time, what you did as far as going to college, what your career was before you came home, all of that kind of thing?
Well, I went to school to be a graphic designer and planned on getting a 4-year degree. My husband and I decided to get married early, so I ended up transferring to a community college and just getting a 2-year associate. But I did get a job full-time. I was working at a newspaper and worked full-time, and then I was in King, North Carolina, and then I transferred to Greensboro, North Carolina, and was working full-time there when I got pregnant with Emily. And it had just always been on my heart that if I ever had children, my husband and I really were on the same page as far as we knew that we both wanted me to be able to be home with our children. And so when I got pregnant, there was really no doubt in my mind that I would be quitting and leaving my job to stay home. We were in a pretty good financial situation in that we didn't have a lot of debt, and that made the transition a lot easier. It still required a lot of sacrifice and a lot of doing without. But in my mind, that was going to be worth it. Being able to be home with my children was just something I felt like God had called me to do, and it was worth whatever the sacrifice.
And that's something I've talked about on my channel before, is when you decide to stay home. And I have a lot of people that ask me questions about, oh, what do you do if you want to stay home? You know, her saying they didn't really have a lot of debt, that's something that I think is really important. If you plan to stay home, if you can stay out of consumer debt, that's probably one of the best decisions, because debt will put you in strap situations to where you don't really have many options. As far as after you had me, you still went back to work part-time, or you quit altogether?
When I had you initially, I stayed home. I quit completely. And then I had the mom of one of my best friends growing up. She had gotten a job at a newspaper, and they had asked her to do some of the classified ads, and she really didn't have the skill set to do that part of the job. So she asked me to come in a couple of days a week and help her figure out the technology of how to do that job. And so I went a couple of days a week, and it just so happens that the lady that was doing a lot of the advertising there at the newspaper, she quit. And so they knew my background and offered me a part-time position there. I think you were about 6 months old at that point. And it was only like 2 days a week, maybe 3 tops if there was a deadline or something. And so I prayed about it, talked to my husband about it, and we were able to work it out so that either my mom or his mom could keep you on those days that I was going to be working, and I didn't work any more than, say, 4 hours at a time. So I did go back to work a little bit part-time, but it just kind of felt like God opened the door there, and it did help us financially. So that worked out. But then when I got pregnant with your brother, I completely quit. And I think you were 3 years apart. Mm-hmm. So you were about 3 when I completely quit everything and just was home full-time.
Yeah, and one thing I remember, and I don't know why I remember this because I wasn't very old, but I guess where you had stayed home with me initially from the beginning when you started working part-time, I remember Daddy was home with me so you could go to work one day, and I remember watching you go out the front, like go down the driveway, watching you at the window, and I remember being sad because you were leaving. Mm-hmm. It's like, I think it's so important. Like it meant so much to, at least I know it meant a lot to me. Can't speak for the other two, but I know it meant a lot to me that you were home with us.
I think it really gives your children security to know that they are at home with their parents. They don't have to worry or be afraid. They're just in a safe place.
What was the heart or the motivation behind you and Daddy deciding for you to be a stay-at-home mom, like stay at home with us? Like I know you said that that's what you felt like the Lord wanted for you, but what's some of the motivation behind wanting to stay in the home with us and wanting to be with us and not put us somewhere else?
Well, I think one of the strongest motivation factors was influence. I wanted to be able to influence you in a positive way. I wanted to be able to bring you up in our faith, to teach you about God and to teach you about creation, and that, that you had a good, strong foundation to start off with. And I think that I felt that if I put you in a daycare or with strangers all day long, what kind of influence would be there? And I didn't want someone else doing that. I felt as your parent, that was my job, was to teach you those important values and morals and teach you how to have respect for your authority and to love God with all your heart and to want to serve Him with your life. And I just felt like nobody could do that as well as I could because I loved you more than anybody. Mm-hmm. God had placed you here in my life for me to raise you up for His glory. And I felt like nobody could do that but me, and I had that responsibility. So
yeah, I have that same feeling with Cade and with this one, is that, I want to be the one to, of course, and with my husband, teach them what I want them to learn and the morals that I want them to have. And I feel that very strongly. And you guys are seeing a little bit of, my background and how I came up by me interviewing my mom. And so you get to see where a lot of my heart comes from because she taught me and brought me up with this mindset. What were some of the challenges or sacrifices that came along with being a single income family that y'all had to face?
Well, I did a lot of cooking. We didn't go out to eat a lot. I mean, I know people that go out and they think, oh, McDonald's is cheap.
It's
it
not.
Used to be more cheap than it is today.
It's not.
But even for us, we didn't go to McDonald's very often.
We were dollar menu if we went.
It
was
went.
Dollar menu every time. Daddy, is it dollar menu? Yes.
But I cooked a lot from scratch. I would find recipes, and I would try to find recipes that could feed all of us cheaply, that didn't cost a lot of money. Bought a lot of chicken. Chicken's cheap. And, so we didn't have a lot of, I guess compared to other families, we didn't do a lot. But we had really great family time. When your kids are small, they don't need a lot. You don't need to spoil your kids with all this junk, Just spend time with them. And we had a lot of quality time together as a family, and I think that's important. I think it just instills a lot of good values in your children. And I think one thing that I really think was a benefit for us was, you were around a lot of adults growing up. And my children, Emily at 3 could hold a conversation with a 60-year-old woman and talk intelligently. I mean, she knew how to hold a conversation, and I think some of that came from that influence that was there. She was around a lot of adults. Now, that's not to say she didn't have friends. She had a lot of friends. She would have sleepovers and things like that. So, you know, those people that say, oh, homeschoolers don't know how to socialize, that's not true. You know, my kids were very social and had a lot of friends their age and did a lot of stuff with their friends, but they also knew how to talk to grown-ups. You know, kids are little small people, but they're not ignorant. I mean, they can hold a conversation. They're smart. They're very intelligent. And I think that being home with us, I think that
We spent all our time around you and Daddy, adults.
and you were very respectful young people. I mean, you knew how to act.
It's because
you know?
we got to ask. We didn't.
You sure did.
Yeah, and my brother and sister are the same way. My brother can talk to, like, he can hold conversations with the older men
A
at
whole
church
range
and
of
the
people.
older men, you know, at gas station. Like, he's always been able to talk to adults. I mean, same for me. In fact, as a teenager, when I got my first job, I honestly felt more comfortable talking to the adults than I did talking to the people my own age, because I was so comfortable talking to adults. So I definitely feel like we did learn that, or become accustomed to that. So you have almost 3 homeschool graduates. I graduated homeschool 2013. When did Peyton graduate? What year? Do you remember? I don't remember. It was a few years ago.
No. What year was it?
Was it 2016, the year I got married? Or was it the year after that? I think it was 2017. I think it was the year after I got married, but I'm not sure.
I think you're right, because there's like 4 years between Peyton and Hannah. So
Yeah.
she's graduating in 2021.
Yeah, she'll
so.
graduate next year. So how did you decide on homeschooling? Because I know I went to our church's private school for 2 years. So how did you decide on homeschooling versus private school or versus public school?
Well, I think the fact that I was already home, I had already left my job and was home, made it really easy to transition into homeschool. Our church had a school, and like you said, you went a couple of years, but when Peyton, my son, was old enough to start school, I think I just made the decision at that point that since I was already home with him, I could bring you back home and we could just start school from there. And it just made it easier. There was a lot of running and ripping between, you know, having to take you to school in the morning, come home, go pick you up, come back home, and then me with him being at home. It just interrupted our day a lot, traveling back and forth. Mm-hmm. And there again, you know, influence, you know, I just wanted you to be home with me because I could control, and I know some people may say control is not a very good word, but when you're a parent, that's really part of your responsibility, is to kind of control the environment your kids are in. And you know, I thought about that aspect, and again, you know, I could teach you a Christian-based curriculum where I could make sure that you knew that God created the universe and not some big bang, and you know, that you could learn those values. So it just seemed like a natural fit because I was already home to just transition into homeschool.
Yeah.
And when I thought about it, and I thought about, you know, a kindergarten through 12th, it was a bit overwhelming.
Yeah, actually,
that was a little bit overwhelming. So I tried to just take it 1 year at a time.
Yeah,
you know?
that was actually my next question, is because you don't have a teaching background or anything like that. So I know a lot of people are intimidated. I'm intimidated by like preschool and kindergarten, and that doesn't scare me. When you get to middle school and high school, I'm like, I am not a teacher. I don't know how I'm supposed to do this. So like, did you just learn as you go? Like, what are things that you did to help you teach us as we got further along?
You know, I had a couple of other ladies that I knew that homeschooled, and there are all kinds of groups that you can become a part of if you homeschool, because there's a lot of homeschooling groups out there now. Where you kind of get together, and one teacher that maybe has a specialty in English, maybe an English background, can get together and they teach the kids, and this will be like maybe once a week they get together. But as far as, you know, me learning how to homeschool, there are so many resources. There are free lesson plans, free unit studies that you can print right off your computer. There are homeschool conferences that you can go to, and you can hear speakers and they can encourage you. But you just learn by doing, really, you do. And you know best what your child needs, and you know best what your child has an interest in. And so one thing that I always enjoyed about homeschool was if I had a child that really loved to be creative and do art projects, we could make sure that we had plenty of art projects to do. And we could even take an English lesson and somehow turn it into an art lesson if we needed to, if that helped that child learn that material better. So you can pinpoint your child's interest, and you can use that in your lessons, and it really gets them interested in learning because you've got it targeted to what they're interested in. And then if they're struggling in reading or something and it's taking longer, in a school situation, like a public school situation, they have to keep up with the rest of the classroom. In a homeschool situation, they are the classroom. And so if you have a child struggling with reading, you can take your time and make sure that they learn. And you don't have to put pressure on that child. Oh, you've got to read this book by, Friday, and you don't have to worry about any of that. You're on your own timetable and your child's timetable. And it just takes a lot of the stress and pressure out of education, you know?
Yeah, and we got to do a lot of fun things too, like nature study, and we did composer study where we studied a different composer, and artist study, and I don't know if they do anything like that in public school. They may do something like it, but not the in-depth that we did. We got to look into all different kinds of things, and that was fun.
And you can plan field trips,
Yeah, we did field trips based off of what we were learning about. I've had a few people ask me what curriculum you used for us. I know you didn't just stick to one curriculum. Can you name a few that you used?
When we first began homeschooling, I used Abeka. I had heard really good things about Abeka. Abeka is a great curriculum. However, after a few years of Abeka, I just felt like it didn't work well for our family. I felt like it was more situated to a classroom with multiple students, a group setting, and also I found it a bit overwhelming. And I was beginning to get discouraged because I felt like there's no way I could do all of this that they were requiring in their curriculum. So I kind of deviated from that and just started trying different things. Like I started using Math UC. That's math with a U and then SEE. That curriculum I really liked for math. It had a lot of manipulatives with blocks and counting tools, and it came with DVD lessons, so I didn't have to actually teach the lesson. I watched the lesson, and it had teaching points for the teacher, and then we went through the workbooks, and and they have a website, so if you have problems, you can contact them, that kind of thing. And I really liked that math program. I used different things for science. I kind of just, I would just kind of research it every year in the summer and just find what I thought was going to work best for the material that I wanted to cover that next year. But I used different things for English and spelling, and trying to think of the name of the curriculum that I used for, I can't think of it. It was a grammar curriculum, the big red book that I had. Anyway, I just really used different things. And if one year I bought something that I wasn't really happy with, I could sell it. What I did was I didn't let the kids write in a lot of the workbooks. I just used a notebook and kept the books clean. And if I didn't want to hold on to it, I was able to resell it at the end of the year. There's a Christian school, Christian bookstore that will take used curriculum, and they'll give you about half of what it's worth, and then they'll resell it in their store. And I actually bought a lot of my material that way. It was used material. Some things I bought new. But, I was able to sell it if I didn't want to use it again, and then I would kind of research through the summer and see what I wanted to try for the next year. So it was a lot of hit or miss, but I found a lot of things that I really liked that I stuck with.
And she has so many books.
We love books.
She has
read aloud.
Every book. Like I name a book, I'm like, I'd like to read that book. I have that book. I borrow books from her all the time.
Bookcases and bookcases full of books.
And our favorite thing, or at least I think it was their favorite thing too, but read alouds in homeschool. We read Narnia. She has like a huge book that
It
has
has
all
all
the
the
Narnia
volumes,
stories in it. We read Narnia. We read The Hobbit. We loved The Hobbit. We read so many books aloud. We read all the Little House books aloud. So read alouds was one of our favorite things. This is the last, I think this is around the last homeschooling question, and we kind of covered a little bit of this, but it's just, what do you think some of the benefits to homeschooling your kids is?
Well, you get to be home with your kids, for one. For two, you get to, if you're a Christian, you get to instill your faith in your education, with your children. I think that's a benefit. Doing Bible with your children and teaching them the Bible verses, and I think that's invaluable. And I think just being able to be home and spend time with each other. My girls, which Hannah right now is doing like a home ec, and I think that's neat because a lot of schools don't teach home ec, and a lot of girls don't know how to cook. They don't know how to do things like that, but it's important because one day they're going to have a family and they need to know how to take care of their family. And so you learn a lot of things that you might not learn if you were in another school system, because like I said, you can target those things to your children and what they're interested in. And there's just so many benefits. I mean, if I were to write a list of negatives and positives, the positives would well outweigh the negatives. I mean, the negatives would be like this, because it does get stressful. I mean, we're all imperfect people, and it can be stressful, and sometimes it can be overwhelming. You have to stay on top of it, and you have to give yourself a little bit of grace, because don't beat yourself up, but there's just too many benefits to name, really, to homeschooling, I think.
Well, and I think a lot of people have misconceptions about homeschool, what homeschool is, which homeschool is actually becoming more popular now with the arrival of the pandemic and people being forced to homeschool. And now I know a lot of people that are choosing to homeschool going forward, or to at least do it on like the online public school system and have their kids home. But I know with Hannah it's a little different because she's the last one. But when we were little and you did school with us, it wasn't do school in your pajamas and roll out of bed and go do we had to get up, we had to do chores, we had to get ready, and then we had to be in the schoolroom by a certain time. And then you have certain things we still had to do testing, like CAT tests.
All states are different, but with our state in North Carolina, you had to do a mandatory standardized test at the end of the year. Well, you didn't necessarily have to do it at the end, but you had to do it during the school year. And so we chose to do the CAT test, and I didn't need any kind of special skills to administer the test. I just had to have a high school diploma, and I have to order the test, and then I send them off to be graded. So all I really do is administer the test, and then I send it off to a place and they grade it. They send me the results, and then I submit them to our non-public education group in Raleigh, North Carolina. I have to send it to them, but
I mean, you are technically a school. We had our
we had to
name.
register our school.
Yeah, we had a school name
with the state.
Okay, we're gonna do the rest of this video with another little guest because he just woke up from his nap. He's got a little bit of a cold or something going on, so he's a little cranky. But basically what we were just saying is you are an actual registered school. It's not just that you homeschool. You have to be registered with the state, right? And you have to send off test scores and things like that. So it's actually a structured thing. It's not just something you just decide to do. So that was the last of the homeschooling questions. Alright, so you stayed home. It was like pre-social media. May have even been, I think it was even pre-blogging world when we were born. It was like before blogs, before stay-at-home mom was an actual like phrase that people used, before social media. So being a stay-at-home mom wasn't necessarily a popular or a common thing. I feel like it's a lot more common now than it was when I was growing up. And I feel like even though it's, it's not a socially expected thing, it's more common than it was before social media. So can you tell me a little bit about how it felt to be a stay-at-home mom when you were really one of the only ones that you knew?
When I first came home and I quit my job, I felt very isolated. In fact, it was very difficult for me at first. I just kind of felt like my value was in my job, and when I came home, I really struggled to find value in what I was doing as a stay-at-home mom, and I didn't have that support system like what's out there now. I did have maybe a couple of ladies that I knew that were doing it at home, staying home and weren't working, but I don't know, I just remember struggling with that, just feeling like I had lost my value. And you don't get thanked by your children for changing diapers and cooking meals, and you kind of sometimes get taken for granted, and you don't have a paycheck to assure you that you're doing a good job. You don't get a raise. And those kinds of things were a real struggle, but I knew I was doing right. I knew that I was doing what God wanted me to do, and that one day my reward would be to see my children grown and living on their own and productive citizens, people that loved God and loved country and respected authority, and that was my goal. My goal wasn't a paycheck, but it was a struggle at first because you just don't get that instant recognition.
That gratification.
You have to prolong that, and it takes a lot of perseverance. But you can do it. You just have to stay focused on what's important. But I had to find the few friends that I could find that I could relate to. because most of my friends worked. And so, but I did have a couple of ladies, and we kind of shared things, and that helped.
Yeah. Okay, so what would you say that the greatest blessing about being a homemaker is overall? The whole being a homemaker, being a stay-at-home mom.
I have no regrets. I would never ever say that I regretted being a homemaker and being a stay-at-home mom. It's the best job I've ever had. It's worth every second.
Even when it's hard sometimes.
Even when it's hard, it's worth it.
And what would you, because I know I get this question a lot, and I feel so underqualified to answer these questions when I get people that ask, what advice do I have for people that want to stay home or that desire to be a homemaker? Because I've only been doing this for a little over a year. I've only been a homemaker, like a full-time homemaker, for a little over a year, and I've only been a stay-at-home mom for 9 months. But what would you say to somebody who desires to stay home with their children? Any advice or anything? Somebody who's not currently staying home with them but wants to.
Well, I would say make sure you and your husband are on the same page, because it's very important that you are. I would also say you need to get a plan in place. I wouldn't just quit my job out of the blue without having a plan in place. That's important, because if you're planning on staying for the long haul and not having to go back to work, you need a plan. So I would get my finances in order first off, because if you've got a lot of debt and financially it's just not going to be possible, then you're going to have to just work on that plan for a while before you make that decision, because you don't want to put your family in a jeopardizing situation where you may lose your house or.
Yeah.
So I would just say, work on a plan. Sit down with your spouse, work on a doable plan, and just start putting it to action as well as you can with your situation until you get to the point where you can make that happen. It's a goal. You just have to work on it. If it's important to you, you'll work on it. And I know it's not going to be easy. For some people, it will be very difficult, but like I said, it's worth it. I've never, ever regretted it.
And that's another reason why I think if you're newly married, or if you're not quite married, if you're not married yet but you want to be, and your desire is to stay home, just make sure you learn to live frugally from the beginning, because I know that's a mistake that I've talked about on here that me and my husband made when we were both working, is we got ourselves into a little bit of debt. We spent money that we shouldn't have spent, and then it took longer for me to be able to quit my job and come home. And I ended up being unhappy for a lot of that time because I couldn't come home yet. And so if you're not even to the point yet where you're married yet, or you're newly married, you don't have kids yet, and you want to come home, or you want to come home now and you're newly married, make sure you learn to live frugally and to stay out of debt, because I think that's one of the biggest things that keeps people from being able to do that, is having a lot of debt and having a lot of bills and stuff like that. Last question. Tell us what you're doing now in your new phase of life, because you're getting ready to have your last homeschooler graduate, and she'll be 18, she'll be going to college or doing whatever. So you won't technically be an empty nester, but just about. So what are you doing now?
Well, this past summer, I went to real estate school and I earned my real estate license, and I actually am working kind of part-time right now as a real estate agent. I didn't know how long the process would take, so I didn't want to wait until she graduated to start that process. So I started it last summer, and I am working part-time. I'm still homeschooling. She's in her senior year, so she doesn't have as heavy of a load with her curriculum. So we usually finish school around lunchtime, and then I'm working. So I'm trying to readjust to going back into the work world. But after she graduates, I'm hoping to be working full-time as a realtor. So,
and that's something you've always kind of had in the back of your mind?
I have always kind of wanted, I love houses. I love old houses especially, but I thought because of that real estate would be a good fit with that. And I'm learning, and I've got a long way to go in my learning process, but I'm enjoying it so far. So.
She has forever had real estate books. Like, it didn't matter if we were looking for a house, not looking for a house. If anybody she knows was looking for a house, she gets the real estate book and looks through the real estate book. And y'all see where I get my love of old houses and old things from. I get a lot of stuff from Mama. So that wraps up all of the interview questions that I had typed up for her. So thank you for answering all my questions and agreeing to sit down with me. And I feel like even if because I know we're Christians, so a lot of what we do is centered around Christianity and around, the Word of God and things like that. But I feel like even if you're not a Christian, I feel like you can benefit from hearing her answer the questions, because I know a lot of you who may not necessarily be of the Christian faith, but you've asked me about staying home and things like that. So I think that everybody can benefit from learning what a experienced stay-at-home mom has to say. So that wraps up the video. Thank you guys for watching. If you enjoyed it, make sure you leave it a thumbs up, and make sure that you're subscribed to my channel if you haven't already. And I will talk to you guys in my next video. And I don't know if you'll be back or not. Maybe. Maybe one day. But bye, guys.